So you might have discovered the idea that the symptoms you're experiencing in your body, those chronic persistent symptoms, might be related to your emotional state. That's great. That's just amazing. That's always the first step, knowing that what we feel physically might be connected to certain emotional distress that we're going through. However, if you've been on this journey for a while and maybe you've been trying the mind-body approach, the mind-body work, and nothing has been working, I'm going to be sharing 2 harsh truths in this video that can shed light on why it might not be working for you. So let's get started. So I'm going to be a little bit harsh and also honest in this video as to why some people don't seem to recover and why some people stay kind of stuck in this journey for years, trying to heal their symptoms, even though on some level they know that they are experiencing stress-related symptoms, what we call mind-body symptoms or neuroplastic symptoms, or what Dr. John Sarno called TMS, tension myoneural symptoms. These terms are all interchangeable, by the way. It doesn't help, I know, to have so many terms. It creates even more confusion, but that's the way it is right now. But to get back to the subject of this video, why do some people get stuck? Why does it seem that nothing's working for them? And I've pinpointed 2 things out of my own personal observation of people who are stuck in this predicament. So if you're one of these people, first of all, don't despair. I'm just going to share these 2 reasons with you, and you're just going to reflect on whether they resonate with you or not. So number 1 could be that you are still seeking a physical or structural or genetic cause to your symptoms or to a part of your symptoms. So on some level, you are still wondering whether your symptoms could be totally out of your control, totally unconnected to the mind or to the brain, and due to something else. Now, if you're having doubts, even if you have this doubt sometimes, not all the time, I want to make you aware of this thing. So deep within us, maybe our ego, what we call our ego, we want to be absolved of certain responsibilities, right? In general, we don't like the idea that we ourselves might be responsible for our own chronic symptoms. And by the way, this is why this approach is not all over the place yet. Because in general, people, even if unconsciously, they prefer to blame their symptoms on something that is totally external to them, on something that they cannot control. And you might say, but why? I'd rather know that I'm able to control and change my symptoms. But the reason is that if they admit that they have some form of responsibility, then they might feel, that they are guilty or broken mentally, which is not the case, by the way. But there is this wish in every one of us, especially in the beginning, before we start to really get aware of how all of this works. This wish that our symptoms are not our fault, right? And this wish, if it's strong enough, it can significantly hold us back from healing. Because what it leads us to is it makes us want to seek other theories, other solutions that support the idea that this is a condition that is external to us, that we're not responsible for these symptoms, that we have no control over them. So this can look like continuing to take test after test after test, even though you've already done the recommended testing by your doctor or specialist. This can look like having really complicated tests and blood analysis until you finally find something that is not totally perfect, and then you base yourself on this theory that because this blood result is not 100% perfect, then this is why you're not feeling okay. This is why you have the symptoms. Again, it's out of your control, in your opinion. And unfortunately, this way of thinking is very, very out there, especially with these specialized kinds of testings for allergies, especially for mold poisoning. We find some people find that there are certain levels in their blood work that are higher than they should be, and then they blame their symptoms on that. And because of that, they take away all of their power to overcome their symptoms through the mind-body approach. Because for as long as you have that external possible cause in your mind that might be causing the pain or the symptoms, then there's only so much you can do. There's only so much power you can have. You're going to feel helpless. You're going to feel helpless because you think that genetically or externally there's something that's causing your symptoms. This can also look like, having an MRI, finding something that's not structurally perfect, and because of that, you go for surgery or you go for pain management, and you think that your pain is always coming from that imperfection, despite the evidence to the contrary, despite the fact that the pain changes around, that, you're not always feeling the pain in the same location. Maybe despite the fact that the medical specialist himself told you that you shouldn't be in so much pain because of that abnormality, but you still hold on to the image on your MRI, you still hold on to the belief that that imperfection in the body is what's causing your pain, right? Or you keep chasing a diagnosis, you keep chasing a different explanation, because this part of you that wants to believe that your symptoms are out of your control is so strong and powerful. So if you're in this predicament, I really, really want you to sit down and be honest with yourself. Do you feel this strong inclination, this part of you wanting to be absolved of all involvement with your symptoms, all personal involvement, wanting to blame your symptoms on something that you cannot control? Because let's admit it feels good, doesn't it, to know that it's not our fault, right? But the downside to that is that then we will be powerless to do anything, So if we keep doubting and we keep entertaining these doubts, this can significantly hold us back from recovery. And this is what keeps so many people in pain for months or years, despite knowing about the neuroplastic approach to chronic symptoms, despite all the scientific evidence. There is something else I want to add as an aside to this one factor, and is that there are certain scientific studies that are showing physical manifestations of certain conditions. For example, conditions like CFS and ME, there are certain physical changes that take place in the brain that are correlated with these conditions, and these are real physical changes. Now, lately, both scientists, researchers, and people are using these studies to show that this is a real illness and that it's not their fault, it's not emotional. Well, this is not true, because even though there are physical changes, we always have to ask the question, but what is causing those physical changes? For example, one of the changes that has been identified with ME is that there is increased inflammation in certain brain areas. And you would say you see, I have ME, I have this condition because there is inflammation in this brain area. But can you ask yourself, why is there this inflammation in the brain in the first place? And most likely you won't find the answer in this research, because the reason why we get certain physical changes that are negative is our emotional distress. So we always have to go back to the root. Even if there is a physical change identified, it doesn't mean that this is an isolated physical change that is out of our control. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have an emotional root cause. Right? I feel very strongly about this because, with all of this research, which is, by the way, biased in favor of research that is focused on physical causes on their own, that might lead to specific treatments that, would make money for the pharmaceutical companies as well. It is a little bit biased towards identifying structural or physical causes, and they don't give enough attention to what caused those structural or physical causes in the first place. The number 2 reason as to why you might not be experiencing relief or healing from chronic pain or symptoms is another insidious belief, another negative belief, and that's the belief that nothing will work for you. It's a common belief among people who have been in pain or symptoms for a long time, who have been disappointed in the past by ineffective treatments, something that can be extremely heavy, and as a protective mechanism, you start believing that nothing can help you because you want to protect yourself from another disappointment. You don't want to have high hopes again, and that's totally understandable. But the problem is that when you approach the mind-body healing already from this belief that nothing will work for you, this can really obstruct progress. Because what happens in most people who are in this category is that they start to try something like a practice or like a healing program, and they don't do it consistently. They don't follow it, from start to finish. They don't go all in because they already believe it's not going to work for them. So what they would do is they would likely kind of start trying different things, and then because the first time or the second time they're doing this, it's not working immediately, they say like, oh, this is not going to work for me, and they don't really kind of embody the practices that they're learning. They don't really, commit themselves. And commitment doesn't mean that you have to try hard, by the way. It's not about, trying really hard. In fact, that can work against you, as I explained in some other videos. But it's about going in for something with that attitude of possibility, of allowing the possibility that this work can help you, and of knowing that if you change certain habits, certain reactions, then this can also start changing the brain and how the brain responds to triggers, right? This is, after all, a fact. This is brain science, that as you start working on changing your reactions, on releasing certain negative emotions, the brain itself starts to change, and that has physical changes on the body. But you have to give this time to happen. This doesn't happen overnight. So you have to have the openness, and to indulge in the possibility that this can work for you. But, as I said, if you go in with the belief that nothing tends to work for you, other people are doing great, this works for other people but not for me, then it's going to be very, very difficult to see a change, because you are holding on firmly to the idea that you are complex, that you are broken, you're a special case. And for as long as you hold on to that idea that you're a special case, that your case is complex, right, it won't work for you, then it won't, because that's the dominant idea that's going to obstruct all other possibilities. So I really encourage you to reflect on this. These are the two most common factors as to why people don't heal with this approach, why people don't see progress. And they can be very harsh truths, because it does sound as if I'm blaming you for all this, but we do have to take some responsibility. I've been there, I've sabotaged myself. I used to see my body as broken, as hopeless, as, not being able to properly heal myself from certain conditions. And for as long as I entertained that belief, nothing was changing. It was just getting worse. So sometimes it's really what kind of beliefs we entertain. And it's really about deciding to take responsibility, to see a symptom as a result of something else, to be curious about it and ask ourselves, okay, I have this physical symptom. It might have physical manifestations like inflammation or spasms or whatever, but what could have triggered it on an emotional level? It's having the guts to ask these questions instead of automatically wanting to blame it all on something else. This is so important, guys, and I hope that what I've said here has helped some of you. And with that said, see you again in the next one, and I wish you all the best in your healing journey.